Okay, now let's look at a small program to figure out how to use a class and an object. Now, I'm sure you remember structures which we had done in previous videos in part 1. In that, what we had done was we had created a structure which had data members, and that was defined separately, or rather declared separately, and declared and defined separately, and as and when required we created a variable of that structure type, right? So we created a structure called student or student info, and then we created a variable of type student. Okay, and then we initialize the variables. So what happened was, then you had to write various functions to actually manipulate these data members. Now what somebody thought was, why not put the functions which are going to manipulate these data members as part of the definition of the structure itself. So the functions that manipulate the data members are put together with the data members. Okay, so you end up with data members and you end up with some functions which manipulate this data, and the whole thing is put inside a capsule kind of thing, and that capsule is called a class. Now whenever we want to actually create a variable of that type, we say we are creating an instance of that capsule now, or class. If you look at it in a different way, we can say that a class defines the specification of the data members and the functions that operate on that data members, and the object is a particular instance of that class. So if I have a class called student, then a particular instance of the student, or rather when I create an instance of that class, I would be storing information about one particular student. If I want to store information about another student, I have to create another instance of this class. So let's just look at how we actually go about coding this. So like before, let's create a program to show the use of class and objects. Okay, quite straightforward. We will keep it simple initially. So include IOStream, nothing new. You have already been looking at this. Console.io, console.io.h, and then we need to decide what the class that will be required. So let me give you an idea of what the problem is. What we want to do is enter two numbers and display the sum, right? We have already done this, but without using the concept of classes and objects. Okay, so now what we are going to do is we are going to create a class, let's say class, doing this casually, let's give it a name as test. So now the first thing is we need to define the data members. So let's say A int B, so we require two numbers, so we have int A, int B, and then we have to define the various functions that are going to operate on these A and B. So what are the things that we require? What are the functions that is required to manipulate this A and B? Of course, one is to get these two numbers from the user, right? So we require a function here, and we require another one to show the sum, right? So instead of saying get, we will say show sum. Okay. Now I have just declared it here. Now what I also need to do, remember, in case of functions, I also have to specify what is going to be returned by this. Now get number is just going to accept the values from the user and store it in A and B. So it need not return any specific return. Okay. So now I don't only declare it, I also define it. So let's give it a method of how to get the number. We have to we will do the coding for the actual getting the number as well. Enter the numbers for addition. Okay. Let's say now see in A, remember we can put it in the single line. So that becomes one function. Okay. And then show sum, again I remove that semicolon and I put a actual method for showing the sum. So see out, the sum is, remember I can directly say A plus B, right? So that becomes my second function. So not only that, what I can also specify or should specify is from where all will this A and B be visible, from where all the data members and the functions be visible. Now when it comes to data members, ideally they should be private. That means they are visible only inside this class, that is class test. So you can't access A from outside. If you want to do anything with A, the class itself should provide you some function, to do what you want. So if it's a question of getting the numbers from the user, then the class should provide a function. Now here in this case, it is providing a function, and you can call this function to get the values from the user into the A and B, right? Directly you cannot on your own get the values and store it in A and B. Okay. So private int A, private int B. Either I can do it like this, or better is what I can do is I can say private. I can put it as a common header kind of thing and say private int A, int B. What I can also do, remember, is that instead of putting it in each and every line, if data members are of same type, I can put it using commas. Okay. So now what about functions? Now remember, if I make this also as private, then this class becomes a totally like a black hole. Nothing will be visible outside. So you can't call these functions at all. In which case you can't access A and B since they are private. And if you make these functions also as private, then you can't even call these. So then this class is going to be useless to you. So what we are going to do is we are going to make them public, right? So once you make it public, what happens is you can call these functions from some other place. Say for example, in the simplest case, we can call it from main. Remember void main, we can call it from there. If it is private, you can't. Okay, so we have created this class. Now what do? We have just created a class. Now remember, any code will run when you run this program, it will always run from main, right? So what I'll do is I'll say void main. Main is something that I have to define, because this is where the whole thing starts. And as usual, like previously, we will clear the screen. Now, after clearing the scene, what do I need? I need a particular instance of this class, right? I need a particular instance of. So remember, when I say int a, what am I doing? I'm creating a variable which I'm naming it as a, which is of type int. So similarly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say test. Now remember, the moment I create a class, this test I can say is a type of data, right? So I can say it is a type, just like int char, right? So test becomes a type. So using a type, I can create a variable. In this case, we don't call it as variable, we call it as an object. So test t1. So which means now I have an object called t1 of type test, right? Second thing is, when I'm running this, at this point memory will be allocated, and in that area of memory there will be two variables available, a and b, which I can't directly access it from main. I have to call the functions getNum and showSum to manipulate them. Okay. So I have got test t1. Now t1 dot getNum. This is how I call these functions. Get number is the complete function name. So t1 dot get number, right? That's all. Automatically this function gets called on which object? On t1. On t1, this particular function gets executed. So here it comes, here it executes this, displays the prompt, then it executes this. So it will accept these two values, okay, and then the control will come back here to the next line. Now in the next line, what am I going to have? t1 dot show sum. So when this show sum gets called, what happens? The control comes here and this gets executed. So the sum is displayed. Now once the sum has been displayed, now it's just a question of making it wait. Okay, now let's run this and see whether any errors. No errors. Okay, so enter the number for addition. Let's say 23 and 32. So what should it be? 55 it should come. Yes. So now once more, just make sure that you understand what's happening here. Okay. Now apart from this, if you notice, it is giving you some warnings. Okay. Now let's see. Okay, great. 34, 9, 43. Great. So there are no warnings as well. Okay. So what we have done, we have created a class called test, which has two private data members. Remember, when I say private, it means it is not accessible from anywhere else other than from within the class. And public means it is visible outside. So these two functions can be called from outside the class. And then you have seen how to call the functions of an object, how to instantiate an object, how to call the functions of the object using the dot operator. So for the first program, I think that's enough. So let's save it. Let's save it in the source, and let's save it as a class object. Okay. Now let's close this and let's